going right now, and the recording has begun. We're going to go ahead and begin with our presentation. I'd like to welcome our team, and Sharath, why don't we go ahead and get started with our presentation. Welcome to our Masters 2020 Masters Technology Architect classes. We're very excited about this, and we're glad to have people joining us from around the world. With us presenting today are Sharath Abraham, our Regional Technical Director for the Northeast of the United States. And with us as well is Delix Alex, a Senior Product Manager, Enterprise Applications. He oversees our AV framework applications and much, much more. And we're going to talk about that today. My name is Richard Sasson. I am the Global Director of Technical Services. I will be your co-host. I'll be in the background. I'll be asking some polling questions and helping to answer the question and answers you have. We also have with us two support folks as well, Sherry Goldberg and Carl Wolkowicz. And I'm terrible at pronouncing your name, Carl. I'm so sorry. And they are here to help answer questions as well. Having said all that fun stuff, welcome to the call. Vincent, you're correct. You can only see me on the screen at the moment. The presenter is the person you're going to be seeing. I'm going to turn it over to the charming, debonair Mr. Sharath Abraham and the wonderful Mr. Delix Alex. Gentlemen, welcome to MPM, and ladies, welcome to MPM-202, creating the seamless control experience. Sharath?
Thanks, Rich. Debonair. Wow, that's a big SAT word. I like that. I'll take it. So as Rich mentioned, I'm the Regional Technical Director. He mentioned Northeast, but I'm just the tri-state. Maybe someday I'll be Northeast. We'll see. But just for now, it's a tri-state. So what we're going to go over today is just web-based configuration, right? So web-based configuration can mean a lot of things, but during this whole session, what Delix and I want to make sure is answer these questions: is who can use web-based configuration? What is web-based configuration? Why use web-based configuration? And where can you use web-based configuration? And then once we go through those questions to kind of figure out what type of solutions Crestron offers in all these spaces for web-based configuration applies to, we're going to do how to do web-based configuration. So, first question, who can use web-based configuration? It's a trick question, guys, because you can use web-based configuration. So everybody that is attending this webinar can use web-based configuration, because web-based configuration uses exactly what the whole term is. It's web-based, right? So you can use Firefox, Mozilla, Chrome, and all you need to know is the IP address of the actual solution that Crestron provides to get into it and configure the product. Moving to the next question is, what exactly is web-based configuration? So if we try to narrow it down, web-based configuration is basically the ability for you to configure everything in one feature set and also deploy it using your favorite web browser, right? So in that sense, it's very easy and simple for you to grasp how to connect to it. You no longer need any of our, Crestron tools per se, Toolbox, Simple Windows, if you're familiar with the Crestron world. And then once you configure it, it also gives you the ability to deploy, these solutions in repeatable spaces. So if we think about, a web-based solution, it's not just one space, right? No one ever buys a solution for one space. It's typically for more than one space, 5 meeting rooms, 10 training spaces, this many. So because of that, the web-based configuration gives you that ability to deploy it in multiple rooms in a scalable fashion. And then at the end, we want to make sure our solutions have the best user experience along with consistency, right? Consistency is a word that you're going to be hearing a lot from me during this whole presentation, is because we want to make sure that consistency is the same for every user interface along with the web configuration guide, right? So if we think about user interfaces, back in the day, you go to one room, you'll see options for, one thing in one room. You go to the next room, you see an option for the other, another set of instructions. Now, if we really think about users who are using these rooms, not everyone is the super tech person. A user at the end of the day just wants to go in the room, use the room, present, show off, have a call, and then leave the room. The whole idea behind web-based configuration and our user experience is you don't need a manual before you attend the meeting, right? Well, let's avoid the test before the actual space. So the next question that we come into is, why would you use web-based configuration? So going into that, one thing that I do a lot is I meet with integrators, I meet with end users, I meet with consultants, and pre-COVID, what I used to do is get in my car and drive around all the tri-states, so uptown, downtown, some parts of Connecticut, all of New Jersey, except for Exit 9. I don't know, past Exit 9, I consider South Jersey, so that's just my little tidbit. But the conversations I have with everyone at the end of the day, moving into these spaces and what you want in these spaces is everybody wants a quick, clean installation, right? If I go to Best Buy and I buy a TV, I just want to hook it up and start watching TV, right? I don't want complications. On top of that, you want reliable hardware with warranty associated to it, right? So if I went to PC and Richards, I'm gonna get the top-notch washer and dryer, and then I'll get the standard warranty, but then I might even chip in a little bit more money for extra warranty. But that's not the case with Crestron because we provide state-of-the-art warranty for 3 to 5, 7 years, depending on the solution. And then the other case is third-party display driver support. Not just display, but third-party devices at the end of the day, right? Because in a perfect world, we would also make displays, but then that might be more stuff for me to actually present. So, in that sense, you are all able to go out and buy Samsung displays, LG displays, NEC, Sharp, Panasonic, and then the application of associating that with Crestron solutions, that's what a lot of people want in their rooms. Low cost of ownership, quick duplication, pre-designed solutions, scalable solutions. These are all bits and pieces of what I've been listening and hearing since I've started this position. But this is also the same conversation that's been happening for the last 3-5 years, especially when I was in tech support, right? When I manned tech support, the easier solution, the easier to support that product. So with that information, what we actually do at Crestron is I get the information and then we provide it to our engineering team. And that's where our engineering team comes in and, amazing people like Delix provide solutions.
So what Crestron provides with AV Framework is some key different things. Sharath has touched upon it as we've gone along here. But the first thing is configuration is built in. It's all done via web browser, right? We made that point right at the very beginning that configuration of these solutions is done simply by entering an IP address, getting to a browser, and doing something, right? So that configuration may vary depending on the solution, the products, and everything in between. But it's very simple. It's maintainable. You have the ability to make on-the-fly changes, and without complexity involved. If you can open a web browser, you can build a room with one of these web-based configuration solutions. From a consistency and user experience standpoint, we've all been in a situation with somewhat more custom deployments where consistency right at the beginning was a key tenet for that room design. But once it was implemented, it's almost there. It's 90%, maybe 95%, but not entirely, because peripherals changed because scope changed, and all of that type of stuff. The web-based configuration solutions allow for consistency in every room and space, and giving you an ability to offer a more premium or polished experience without the need to design, to implement, to test, and deploy a totally custom experience. Again, the key point being here, a reduced total cost of ownership and deployment. The point about driver support, right? We support, obviously, displays and projectors are probably the key type of third-party device that we support in AV Framework. We also support source input devices. But with this, oftentimes maybe a 1 year down the road or 2 years down the road, as the room has been used heavily, maybe some peripheral needs to be changed, replaced, customized, or the needs of that room has grown, right? In a custom world, you need to reprogram that whole system and get it deployed. With the solutions we're going to be talking about here, drivers kept up to date, you have the ability to make those changes by simply logging in. And finally, all of these solutions, Crestron has put a lot of effort now into putting firmware updates and software updates out for all of these products, with the ultimate intention that when you make investments in technology, a year or two down the road or even beyond, you're not in a situation where now the market's evolved, new technologies are in place. You don't need to do this forklift type of upgrade. You can evolve your room spaces. So
Yeah,
that
yeah,
2, 3, 4 years
yeah. So that's
down the road,
mainly,
rooms
yeah,
don't lag behind.
yeah, that's the main, item, right? Because a lot of rooms don't change in regards to how it's used. It's pretty much upgrading what's in the room. So Delix's point is, in a lot of spaces, you'll have a display and then a new display comes out, 6 months. So then during that conversation, you need a new driver. So that's where, web-based configuration comes into play, is because the solutions actually evolve as you evolve as a company, right?
Exactly.
We're not the one thing we don't want to do is talk about boxes. The one thing we want to make sure we have a conversation on is how these solutions evolve as you evolve. Just like how we're in present times. Did anyone have an idea this COVID-19 situation would happen last year? So I'm pretty sure everyone and every organization out there is trying to figure out, how do we evolve now? And then because of that evolution, how are these spaces going to evolve? And that's where web-based configuration comes into play, because you can figure out what to do in those rooms utilizing the solutions without too much complexity. So that chimes in right into our next conversation, is where can web-based configurations be used? Pre-COVID, a lot of these spaces we would name out as classrooms, lounges, huddle space was a big thing, open space was a big thing, break rooms, student meeting rooms. Now, moving forward, these spaces are going to change, right? Like we're gonna have a lot of different feature sets. There might actually be more rooms that aren't open. It might just be a closed room. So you might have planned that you'd have this open space and you wanted to present this as open space. Because of COVID, now your plans are going to change, saying now we're going to have dedicated spaces for dedicated presentation work, a dedicated group teamwork. But the fact of the matter is you can use web-based configuration in any space at the end of the day. We're not limiting what spaces you can use web-based configuration. We're just trying to make sure that everyone on the webinar understands that these products are not tied to a space. These are solutions for any spaces.
Exactly.
So next we're going to go into is designing and selecting Crestron solutions. But before that, we have a little poll that we wanted to see what you guys are doing out there. So in regards to the actual poll, the question is going to be, which of the following AV framework systems have you deployed? And then for that, you have a couple of choices: DMPS Lite, Crestron Mercury, Air Media, or AV framework for control system. So we just want to get an idea of everyone attending the call, if you ever actually done anything regarding web-based configuration.
That's right. And we'll leave this poll up for about a minute to allow everyone in attendance to vote. Let us know what they're doing, what they're seeing. I noticed a lot of people are reporting issues with registration. We will have our events team contact everybody that has reported issues and make sure that their registrations are going correctly, which is great. And if your answer was none for the poll, that's correct. We'll be able to assess that by the people who've responded, who's done none. Not a problem, because a lot of you are coming to none. Good to know, gang. Appreciate that. All right, we're going to wrap this up in about 5 seconds, and we'll let you go from there, Mr. Sharath. But let's take a look at what our polling led to and what the results were.
Awesome.
And so we can see here, based on the results, that 71% of our customers have done Air Media, 56% have done Crestron Mercury. The next one is 41% have done DMPS Lite, and 38% have done AV Framework, which is pretty fantastic. I do love the Love Air Media, Love AV Framework items in the chat. For those of you who are being distracted by chat and or questions, you can click on the X and it should be able to close the chat in your sessions so that it doesn't pop up and bother you. Other than that, I'm going to turn it back to you, Sharath, to lead us down the path.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. So, yeah, in regards to designing and selecting the solutions, I want everyone's mindset to be that you can mix and match, right? We're not going to we're going to talk about the solutions, but I want everyone to understand that each of these solutions can be used with each other, right? So at the end of the day, if we look at what options we have available, we really have a couple of tiers, right? So if we wanted just simple display control and simple video switching and audio switching, you can go with our DMPS Lite product set. What that allows is presenting in the room to make it a very simple solution, right? So if you go to our DMPS Lite page, you'll see a lot of DMPS Lite transmitters and receivers. Now, one thing that these DMPS Lite products have internally is the ability to control your display in the room, because if we think about how rooms have evolved in the last couple of years, I started Crestron 8 years ago. And that was with tech support. And then when I was at tech support, I remember I would get a lot of calls about these divisible rooms, these board rooms, these complicated rooms where they had to change some code, where they had to do this, where they had to do that, update the user interface to add a new button. But if we talk, if we stop and think about how rooms have evolved from those boardrooms and divisible spaces, which are still there, which are still part of the whole design for most spaces. And those spaces can be utilized with AV Framework as well. But if we think about the rooms that have been evolved is now smaller spaces where end users just want to present, plug in their laptop, plug in their iPhone, use their iPad, use their Surface tablet, and then present, because that's where everything's going. And especially in the COVID times, right? If we're thinking about how workspace is going to change after this, a lot of people are going to want to just use their personal laptop or their personal device, and all they want to do is plug it in cable or present wirelessly and just get done with the meeting. So that's where the DMPS Lite product line would come into play. Then let's say those rooms are evolving where now you want to add some additional feature sets, such as I want to be able to make a phone call through my laptop using Zoom, Teams, WebEx, Google Meet, and I want a microphone and a speaker in the room. You can then use a Mercury. But then the Mercury also provides digital signage for that display in the room, so that the actual return on investment for that room is much higher, because now you're using the actual display to do some digital signage for the scheduling meeting, information about the next meeting, and then you can also tie it in with Airboard as well. Then if we talk about the next rendition, is the AM-200 and the AM-300. So then you can start adding in a keypad, a touch panel. If you wanted to add an occupancy sensor, we can do a PoE occupancy sensor. So the solutions change as the rooms change, right? So if we wanted to, let's say, one day you're having a DMPS Lite, but then now you want to add wireless presentation to it, cool. Add an AM-200 or 300 as a source of DMPS Lite, but now you also have the ability to use the output to go to the display, and the display now provides the digital signage information. And then these are all solutions where you can connect to each of those devices in a web browser and set up those particular settings. And then your last option you have is what we call AV Framework. So with AV Framework aspect of it, we had a quick poll, another poll that we wanted to kind of discuss, and I believe Delix, did you have the poll in regards to these solutions?
I think I think we can hold off on the poll for a little bit longer. We'll maybe wait till we get to the AV Framework slide here. But the key point with all of these things, just to add on to what Sharath was saying, was it's not groundbreaking doing web-based configuration of a single product, right? But this is web-based configuration of a total room. So that's where the value really comes in, right? Each of these solutions gives you the ability to deploy a room solution, not an individual switcher and an individual wireless presentation solution. So all the three on the left here, DMPS Lite, Crestron Mercury, as well as Air Media, all of these solutions allow you to have basically those devices at the center and heart of the system without the need for an external Crestron control processor. And on the AV framework solution is a deployment that allows you to grow the system, evolve the system, and with extra devices like sensors and keypads and source devices and all that. And if you need to go there, but all of these, as we've been saying so far, you need once you have a scope and vision of the room, the aim with Crestron in providing these various configurable solutions is that you can select, mix and match, as Sharath said earlier in the presentation, and design for that space. So each of these, as you can see, the blocks and functionality vary slightly, but now you choose and tailor to what the room needs are.
Yeah, definitely.
So now,
and then, oh, sorry about that.
no, go ahead.
No, I saw a question come in real quick that somebody mentioned that Mercury also has occupancy sensor. Yes, it has a built-in occupancy sensor, but I just reiterate the fact that with the Air Media, there is no built-in occupancy sensor, so you can use a PoE occupancy sensor. And that goes back into that conversation of how, we as technical directors and tech support provide information to Delix and his team, and they come up with new ways to integrate these products within the room. So that's also the point that I wanted to make, is that we value all the feedback that we get from end users, integrators, and dealers, and everyone out there that uses our system. So I just saw that quick question come in, just wanted to answer that.
So now let's take a look at each of these systems individually, right?
Yeah.
And talk a little bit more in detail about what are the capabilities of these solutions, and figure out what are the key benefits of each. So you, as those consuming these devices and solutions, know which one to select.
Yeah, so moving right into it, let's just get into DMPS. So the DMPS Lite product line grew from our already the DMPS processors and solutions, but this offers a much more simple based solution for a room. So you can control CEC, RS-232, and you'll notice the amount of ports there are in here. Now, I want to reiterate that these aren't our only models. If you go to our DMPS Lite product page, you'll notice all the transmitters, all the receivers that will work within the DMPS Lite family. Now, within this, we have a couple of new solutions that came out recently, which is the 210, 410, and 510, and these are all 4K capable. And then you'll also notice that I have the SW version in it. So that's a different product model where you can actually power a device over PoE with the receiver. So if we think about a solution set in a room, that's valuable, right? Because if you wanted to throw in a touch panel, but you wanted to also power the touch panel, why not use a receiver that's already in the room for it? Why do we have to specify a PoE switch when you can use the receiver end of it? And then on top of that, you'll also notice that there's speaker outputs on here. So if you wanted to then add some audio to the room, and then as the room evolves, you can add the speaker, but you can also use our modular-based amps to it, because if we look at this product line, this is not a full RU. The 510 is actually 3/4 RU. So if you wanted to fill up the rack space and then have additional power to it, for the speakers, you can throw in our modular amps as well. But the main aspect of this is you can throw one of these in a room and then use it for power on, power off for the TV. So you don't have to worry about that feature set.
And sure, just to add on, with the DMPS Lite solution, one thing to know and understand is that the DMPS Lite product can live kind of in that standalone configuration for those simple spaces, or it could be integrated as part of a larger AV framework ecosystem. So we're going to be diving into that in a little bit more, but I just wanted to highlight that because maybe it does come off as confusing in terms of how they can be applied.
Good point, correct. So then let's say your end user wants to have the ability to share a presentation wired or wireless. Why not use an AM200 or 300 as a solution? It's
especially in this day and age, right? With
definitely.
COVID.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure no one's gonna want to come and use, you know, the laptop or the PC. That's the room PC, when they can just utilize their own laptop and iPad. But I mean, that's also how the organizations have shifted in terms of worker space as well. Is everyone has their own device now, right? Everyone has a Surface, everyone has an iPad, an iPhone, an Android base. So why not utilize what they already have to share and present for these rooms? Now, this can also come into play not just for presentation rooms. These can also work in everyone's office. And if you want to just come in, I know at Crestron, a lot of people that have the offices have an Air Media 200 and 300 behind their displays. And then every time I want to just kind of quickly present what I'm showing next week, I can use Air Media in these spaces. But then this unit also allows you to evolve the room as well. So let's say, you know, the space is now an AM200, and then later on you want to add occupancy access to it for sensors, you can throw that in. But with web-based configuration, you're not programming, you're not doing anything outside of the web, right? You're going back to the AM200, connecting to it in a browser, and then adding the integration pieces that you want for that front of room experience.
So Sharath, I just wanted to walk through a scenario, right? So
Yeah.
imagine, if you will, it's it's post-COVID times. We're all talking about heading back to the office and all of this. You enter the office and it's time for your first collaborative meeting. You enter a conference room, right? With this type of solution, what you can ultimately build is in a situation where instantly you walk in, the room knows you are there, and the display wakes up. You look at the front of the room, the display, you confirm that you're in the right meeting room, because this solution has integration with scheduling solutions like Office 365 and Google Calendar. So now you know you're in the right room. In the background, you notice some nice corporate messaging. Hey, maybe you were named Employee of the Month or something. That's the digital signage integration here. And then finally, you noticed on the bottom left, connection information to share your content wirelessly, right? You open up your iPhone, swipe down, and connect. So you have now the ability to kind of build out this experience, again, tailoring it for your need.
Yeah.
And I think, especially in this day and age, this particular solution.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the main key points is communication within everyone in the organization once everyone slowly comes back into the office space, once that happens, right? So why not use the displays in these spaces to provide communication about new COVID messaging, right? You know, I know a lot of HR departments are going to have a lot of messaging coming out in regards to COVID, you know, maybe washing hands, reminders to not shake hands. So there's going to be a lot of messaging. So AM200 300s can utilize the displays in all these spaces to, you know, make that messaging much easier to do.
Yep.
Now continuing from there, if we want to add a Mercury or speaker, you know, there's a funny story about this Mercury. So once COVID happened, I actually brought all my demo equipment home, because I still do presentations virtually just like this. And then one of the things I noticed was my wife, working from home, was using her laptop. She just got a new job and she got this new laptop, and she was having meetings, and the microphone and speaker was just terrible experience on the laptop. So then I just kept listening to her saying, "Can you hear me? Can you hear me?" And then I kind of just said, here's my Mercury. I powered it on, plugged in USB for her, and she goes, "What do I do now?" I'm like, "Nothing. You just talk into the Mercury and listen to the Mercury." She goes, "Oh, that's it?" I go, "Yeah." And then at the end of the week, she was like, "This is actually much better than my laptop." So then that got me thinking, you know, after COVID, a lot of people are going to be working from home. So in my mind, solutions can be looked at in terms of a home solution as well. Why, you know, so Felix, coming into this Mercury, we could see that you still have the wired and wireless presentation, but we're now adding in the audio conferencing aspect to the space of the room as a solution. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there's also occupancy detection built into this. So if someone walks in, the display turns on, someone walks out, display turns off. So the front of room experience now just changed from just a display and presenting wireless or wired to now having an audio conferencing solution within the room itself, right? If we talk about an end user or an integrator or their wants and needs, they just say, I just want to be able to connect my laptop, run my Zoom meeting, run my Teams meeting, and then hear it without actually fidgeting around a whole bunch of settings and things like that. So that's where the Mercury actually comes into play. And at the end of the day, if you haven't noticed from our first slide to where we are now, you still have that display control without adding additional pieces because you're using that solution right within that room.
Now we get to AV Framework, right? So AV Framework, it's a bit confusing. I have to admit, right? So we've talked about these 4 categories of solutions, right? We started with the DMPS Lite, just that standalone system supports display control. We built up to Air Media, add some occupancy sensing, add some, you have the display control, digital signage functionality, scheduling integration. Worked on top of that, added some, added the audio conferencing and call control functionality. And then last, we are now in the bucket of AV Framework. AV Framework is room configuration. And now allows you to do much more advanced workflows that perhaps you often do you may do with a more custom system. So now this can consist of switchers and displays and projectors, sensors, keypads, source devices, touch panels, and beyond, right? And we're gonna walk through that here in a bit. But you have the ability of now advancing the room and still providing that same user experience as some of these other examples that we provided, but you have the ability to add some more intelligence into that room space. So what are some of those types of peripherals? We can walk through that here and start with the heart of the system, what AV Framework runs on.
So you know, just this conversation, we've now, just so everyone's still with me, following me, and Delix and I, is we've now just went through the product line where you can buy the product, install the product, and then not product, as say solution, install the solution, and then utilize it without adding bits and pieces, but with the web-based configuration. Now we're getting into a conversation where additional, needs, additional wants and needs for the room can be addressed utilizing AV Framework, which is different than the web-based configuration solutions we just discussed previous to all of this. So with AV Framework, it all relies on the processors. So, processor at the end of the day, if we think about it, is just a computer, but specifically for Crestron. And a couple of units that are processor-based is DMPS, so that's our digital media solution for audio, video, USB distribution in a room, MPC3s, which is a user interface and a processor all built into one, and RMC3, which is a processor, and BC4, where BC stands for virtual control. Because if we look at all these product lines, they have different feature sets for each of those units.
And just to add on, we're gonna be walking through each of these systems later. I saw some chat questions asking when we're going to get into the technical part of this, right? And what we're trying to do here is set the baseline for the audience on what all these configurable solutions are, and then we'll dive into the actual configuration pages of each of these solutions. So just hang in there with us, and we'll get there.
Yeah, just think of it as a learning, a math progression. You got to learn how to add before you multiply. So,
exactly.
We're getting to that point. I mean, in a very specific world, in a very beautiful world, in my mind, and everyone would already know what AV Framework is and understand it. But I want to make sure that everyone attending this webinar who hasn't really been in the forefront of AV Framework has an understanding of where that plays. But we're getting into the technical conversation as well. So, you got to add before you multiply, just the progression towards that. So what product lines support AV Framework? If we look at what internally with Crestron, we provide a lot of products, right? I remember when I first started Crestron and I was in tech support, I thought I'd get fired in 3 months because nothing made sense, because the amount of products that we had just was mind-blowing to me. So I didn't think that I would understand all these products at one point, but here I am 8 years later, still understanding new products that everyone is putting out in regards to Crestron. So what supports AV Framework? If we think about the DMPS Lite that we mentioned at the beginning, if you now wanted some additional feature sets as a user interface or anything like that, now we can associate the DMPS Lite with an AV Framework world in a bit. So you can utilize the DMPS Lite transmitters and receivers, you can then add an AM200 as a source into it. And then you can also add a user interface that can then be able to switch between the inputs and outputs, right? And then once we get into that, these provide a very easy solution for point-to-point and also video switching. And then we'll get into what we now discuss, the user interfaces. So you'll notice that, you know, we have touch panels, we have button panels, we have cable cubbies, and, you know, we understand that this is going to change in conversation moving forward. The use of these user interfaces are going to change going forward. That's why we also discuss that AV Framework also supports X panels to this day, and then it will support HTML5 X panels, which Delix will get into a little bit more a couple of slides down. But we also want to make sure that everyone understands that if you wanted a user interface, we can incorporate the user interface by utilizing the AV Framework configuration page. Now, if we just step back a little, let's say this unit has one COM port, but let's say you needed another COM port, another IR port. That's where our pieces for a control gateways come into play. If you look at what's on the screen, that's a Sen IO COM device. And what that device does is you can place that behind a display or a projector and connect it over COM and then communicate with it with one of these processors. So if you had an ARM C3 and you wanted to control the display in the room, very simple, you can use one of these. Now, for the last 3 to 5 years, maybe, I think the main conversation has been AV is meeting IT, but let's all get serious right now. AV has met IT. Let's just stop having that conversation of when AV and IT will merge. It's already merged. So we need to start thinking that way moving forward is what are these solutions that we're putting on the network that can provide that functionality for these rooms. So instead of classic RS-232 IR, we can then now use these boxes to control it without running a long RS-232 cable. Why not just use a box that you can put right by the display and then control that solution via RS-232, but have a processor talk to it. And then,
yeah, and especially in the VC4 conversation, sure, I think this especially applies, right? So the VC4, I mean, I'm not sure how many of the audience here is familiar with it. It's our virtual control control platform that runs ultimately in a server-based architecture. So now you have a scenario where the control processor lives outside of the room and perhaps in your IT infrastructure somewhere. So this becomes important now because of that distance, that mere distance between where the control processor is and where your displays are, and maybe you still have some displays living in a non-IT friendly world. These control gateways that we offer really allow you to build out a system or multiple rooms and systems with that.
Exactly, and then that goes right into the next conversation is AV Framework supports third-party devices, right? So flat panels, sources, cable TVs, video servers, you know, because these requests are never ending, because an end user might want a third-party source in all these rooms, and then we're providing on the back end the solutions to incorporate these into these solutions without getting too deep into programming, because at the end of the day, it's web-based configuration. So with that in mind, we also provide additional feature sets, which is controlling your projector screen or external system triggers, power modes, advanced video routing. So these are bits and pieces that are built into AV Framework and which is also being built upon with more and more options as well. So we don't have to necessarily be deep involved with the Crestron programming side of things, because the web-based configuration solutions gives you the easy and necessary needs for a particular room set at the end of the day.
And I think this point actually just kind of reiterates again that progression of those systems that we highlighted earlier, right? The Mercury DMPS Lite and Air Media System standalone, maybe you don't get this and more section, right? You get the functionality that's already defined for those systems, those rooms that we've imagined up as the use cases for those systems. But with the full AV Framework deployment, you get this advanced functionality in terms of setting up more complex routes and responding to inputs and outputs and relays and building more intelligence and logic into the system.
Yeah, definitely. And then, you know, with that in mind, if we want to talk about AV framework a little more, we could talk about it all day. Delix and I can talk AV framework for hours and hours and hours and day. But at the end of the day, if everyone just forgot everything I just said, don't worry, don't be scared. We have plenty of resources at Crestron.com. So if you want to just go to the microsite for AV framework, you can actually Google AV framework and it'll point you to the microsite, and this will be provided. Well, in addition to that, if you go to each AV framework product page, so let's say your DMPS, your RMC3, your MPC3, BC4, there are downloads specific to the AV framework that you can do on the resources tab. And then last, we also have AV framework videos right on our Crestron.com training. So if you go to our training portion of our website, we have a lot of videos regarding AV framework. So don't fret. If you forgot everything, don't worry. You can always just go to our website and then find additional training involved. So,
and one of the most common questions that I get with AV framework is how to figure out what sorts of devices are supported on those different systems.
oh, right.
And I think so. The first thing is when it comes to third-party devices and drivers, Sharath, what's the best place to find that information?
Right. That's a very good point. So for third-party devices and drivers, we actually have a dedicated website, drivers.crestron.io. So that's drivers.crestron.io. And that is where our engineering team internally provides all the drivers for your third-party displays. So you can actually import those into it, which I'll show during our build systems area of that aspect. But
and the good thing
that
about
driver's web.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that driver's website gets updated just about every couple of weeks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now if you need to find out what Crestron products are supported for that configurable room solution, the best place to look is that operations guide for that particular product. For example, I want to know on the DMPS3 AV framework instance, what products are supported. I go to this guide. Right at the beginning of the guide, there's this feature matrix that clearly identifies to me what peripherals, what are my options there to know. So those are the two places that I would refer to.
Yeah, definitely. So moving on is the next part of the presentation, is the exciting part. Let's build some stuff, right?
Sharath, I tell you what, before we go ahead and build some stuff,
yeah,
I'd like us to take time here to answer a lot of questions that have been coming up.
Okay.
And I think we need to slow down a little bit for our customers and let them know that this is an incredibly diverse audience. We have over 1,460 people on the call from all over the world, and we want to thank them for joining us. So what you have established up front is explaining what AV Framework is. AV Framework has a set of products that we use, okay? And we're going to talk about the room types you could use in AV Framework. In fact, I'm going to start a poll, if you don't mind, real quick before you jump in.
I love polls.
I love polls. Asking our team, or asking our attendees, what room types do they think they could use AV Framework in? Okay, and I know one of the questions is about video teleconferencing support, and we're going to wait till the poll ends and how that comes together. But there's a lot of stuff going on and a lot of questions. I want to remind everyone, we may not be able to answer all of your questions during the call. We will send out an email report with the questions and answers to everyone who showed up on the call today. And we will be adding this to our online help system on Answer ID 2015 later this week as well. There's questions about, can I build my own driver modules? Okay, and that's something they can do, correct? Right, pretty easily. Well, relatively easily if they know simple Windows.
Yeah,
if
they
know IR,
Windows.
If they know IR, they can learn their own drivers, correct?
Correct.
And are we covering that today?
One thing that we want to have a conversation about is also you can create your own IR drivers within Crestron. So if you ever if you ever purchase one of our USB IR learners, you can actually utilize that IR learner to create a driver that can be used within a room. If you wanted to also create a driver for the custom drivers for third-party controls, we have additional information on how to do that using our SDK application of it. But we'll get into it a little bit more as we move forward.
Right. And so while people are still answering the polls here real quick, I want to remind everybody that, you know, AV Framework is one of the many, many different solutions Crestron offers, right? And that's an important aspect to understand. Your customer's needs for a solution will dictate if this is the proper solution for them.
Good point,
And
Rich.
so that's really an important thing to understand. This doesn't replace custom program systems.
Not at all.
What this intention of this product is to open up your market to different types of rooms that people complain are too expensive because they require custom programming. It's about setting expectations up front. What is it that the system of the AV Framework will do? Okay, will it create a solution that can be deployed on a grand scale, which I know you're going to cover in the session in a moment? Okay, does it meet the needs of the customer, and can it solve the problems that they are having quickly and easily, or do they need a custom solution? It all depends on the requirements, and as design engineers and architects, your responsibility is to understand the needs of the customer and choose the right solution. AV Framework is a great solution for certain room types. It is not a solution for a network operations center. It is not a solution for a boardroom with 12 different displays. So really, it's important for us to understand and take the AV Framework additional courses we offer, understand what we're sharing here on how AV Framework can be implemented and utilized. So let me go ahead and end the poll real quick and turn it back to you, and then I'll share the results in a second, Sharath.
Yeah, I mean, as you share that poll, I just want to, you know, one of the things that I have, one of the items that I always have a conversation about is that Crestron provides solutions like we're an ice cream store with gazillions of flavors, right? Not everyone likes vanilla, not everyone likes chocolate, not everyone likes strawberry, but we have solutions that fit needs for every end user rooms and items like that. So with that in mind, to Rich's point, is the conversation has to really be with the end user and who you're providing the solutions to on how they want to use the team. So if you're providing a solutions to a company that specializes in HR, you want to figure out how the HR department uses these rooms. If you want to provide a solution for a hospital, you got to provide an idea of how they utilize these rooms. So if they want a vanilla ice cream with some sprinkles on top, you know, throw in an AM-200 with occupancy control. So, you know, just to give an idea of how the conversation with the end user or your client has to be the first step in figuring out if this provides that solution. It's just like figuring out what flavor you like.
All right, let me go ahead and share the results. Oh, wait, I did that already, sorry. There we share the results, sorry, hit the wrong button. As you can see, everyone seems to think that there are a lot of options for AV Framework, which is great. The interesting thing I think we should address is legacy video teleconferencing systems and DSP technology, and what we stand with AV Framework and how that gets implemented. So Sharath and Delix, would you care to discuss that with the group?
Sure. So that is one area that we haven't put a lot of focus into on the AV Framework side, and a lot of the reason for that is because we have a whole different lineup. I think either we've had a webinar or we're going to cover that, our Crestron Flex solutions that really are like designed and oriented towards the unified communications rooms. We are actively looking at ways to integrate UC more so into a larger ecosystem. We haven't done it yet, but definitely something we're looking at. So DSP and kind of the legacy VTC type of stuff, video codec is not supported yet in AV Framework.
And then moving on, let's get into the fun part. So open collaboration spaces. I noticed in the poll that was one of the top responses. So open collaboration spaces, let's make it easy and simple. Throw an AM-200 and then connect it to the display. So what does that entail in terms of web-based configuration? So if I go ahead and switch over. So then in this screen.
So Sharath, just tell me how you got there. How
Oh, right. Good question. So for most of these environments, it's much easier to use a DHCP server so that all these devices get an IP address so that you can access it. And then you can use Toolbox to find the devices, or you can use an advanced IP scanner or some sort of IP scanner to find the IP. And then once you use a DHCP server, you can actually statically assign the IP addresses right within the unit. But like I mentioned earlier, all of these devices can be accessed via a browser. So if I go to this browser area, I put in the IP address of my AM200, and then you'll notice that on the left side, you have a lot of options. On the left side, you have access to the HDMI input, access to the HDMI output, and then these provide functionalities that are normal in a lot of environments to work with the displays. But the feature set that I wanted to make sure is if we go into the tab that shows AMPS, this is where we're actually getting into the web-based configuration of your actual room. So I name my room Sharath AM200, and then you'll also notice in the system tab there's based on occupancy setting. So if I want, I can always say standby is always on, and then you can set up times that it's on, and then if it's not within those times, you can turn it off. So you can also choose the option to based on occupancy. And then you can just save it without any other changes or items like that. So it's very simple to make changes within the web-based configuration because a lot of these options are drop-down menus.
And the power settings are something that you'll see so in this standalone system, also in our larger systems. And I think this day and age, I think power management, energy savings is a key thing, right? Why not keep displays? Why keep displays on if they don't have to be? So you have the ability of starting that room either based off occupancy or just a pure schedule.
Yeah, definitely. And then schedule-wise, it's easy as just adding in your Office 365 account to the room so that if they book the room or they book the space, the information can be showed right on the display. So you're utilizing the display in more than one fashion.
So, and I think we provide three options here ultimately. One is Crestron Fusion, Exchange, or Google. Crestron Fusion gives you a little bit more of a management aspect when you integrate to the larger Crestron Fusion ecosystem. Fusion provides direct connect to different scheduling providers here. So you have that option, or the second option here is using Exchange or Google directly. Simply enter credentials, click save, and now you have that meeting room information in front of you. It's sort of what I was saying earlier. Sometimes getting into the conference space is just knowing that you're in the right space and how much time you have left.
Mm-hmm, yeah, and then once we go down the next tab, you can actually, this is where you would set up your CEC control. So just like that slide I showed, we just want CEC. If I click this drop down, you'll notice that on this list, there are a list of items of third-party drivers already built in. And then in this case, I just wanted CEC. And then you would choose the default input for that device. You'll notice on the bottom, there is a test button, right? So if you are in the room and you wanted to test it while you're there, you can hit the test button to give you the ability to test it. And you'll notice on the drop down, you can do power on or power off. So the ability to test is also available, right? Because if we think about Crestron and the way Crestron functioned previously, you'd have to use our proprietary Toolbox software to run what we call our debugger to figure out if the commands are working or not. But web-based configuration in AM200 gives you that ability to test right when you're in that room. So once you know it works, you're good to go and you're done.
So we provide a list of, obviously CEC is a generic option here, but we also provide options for some of the most common device types. But hey, if you don't see if you don't see a device that you're looking for here, you can just click import. Sharath, go ahead and do that for me. So when you do this right here, what we're actually doing is integrating with that portal that we mentioned earlier, the drivers.crestron.io. And just pulling in drivers on a real-time basis. This is something we hope to bring across the board. We've done it first in this AM200-300 product, and we've done it in the Mercury, and you'll see this sort of logic happening more so. So that way, it just streamlines the experience. There's no file downloads and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, we basically just set up our room by the time we just talked.
Yeah.
So how long did that
Yeah.
take?
I,
So
I would say about 4 minutes so far.
yeah,
So far, we've set up scheduling, we've
yeah.
set up occupancy,
Hmm.
and the display control.
Yeah, and then once we go to that, let's say we want to add a touch panel later on down the line. This is where you would access the ability and then display customization of that. You'll notice that in the drop down for general for touchscreen and display, there are now two options: AVF 1.0, which stands for AV Framework, and AVF 2.0, which is the newer user interface. So now you have the ability to choose between user interfaces because, like I mentioned a long time ago, we're trying to be consistent with all the user interfaces in a room.
Yeah, so there's two options, and ultimately it's styling. It's sort of to that point of, hey, you know, the market design needs and norms for user experience change. So we've done so as well. In many of our products, we've rolled this out.
Yep, and then we've now added the ability for custom backgrounds and then custom help. So there are a lot of options that you can utilize in web-based configuration that you know you would have to do customize with another solution. And then everything else can be routed within here. So if you wanted to do priority routing for your room for air media, HDMI, or airboard, you have that ability as well. And then if we go into the device configuration tab, this is where you would add in the PoE sensor, the new device that we just mentioned earlier. And then it's as simple as just adding in an IP ID. But if you're not familiar with Crestron, this is the communication line that we use between Crestron devices within the Crestron. And then the last tab is manage. Now this part is important because any changes you make within the web-based configurations have to be activated. That's similar to, let's say, you make a change and then you kind of have to, you know, save the change, right? So pressing the activate button is saving that change. So once we save that change, then you're good to go. And you also notice that earlier when I made a change, you have that button up here. So you don't have to always remember it because you'll get this big red flag pointing at you every single time, and then it'll allow you to activate that configuration.
And what it's ultimately doing in the background is reaching out to all the devices, endpoints, etc., configuring them to how you've now set up the system, and bringing everything online and in sync.
Yeah, and look at that. We just built the system in less than 5 to 10 minutes. And then if we look at it, in terms of the next solution, what we provided is Air Media 2, HDMI, and CC control all within 10, 15 minutes of setting up the room.
And I think it's open collaboration spaces, stand-up spaces, these simple huddle rooms that you just need source presentation, and with source presentation, it can be wired or wireless.
Yeah. And then now let's say the room is now evolving into where you want to provide a speaker and mic for unified collaborations, right? You want to have the ability for a person to come in with a laptop, plug in their laptop via USB, and now we're going to want to provide that ability. So what would you use? Web-based collaboration. Let's look back in my little book. Oh, Mercury, look, that provides a solution. So if I go into that in that mindset, if I connect to my unit, so in regards to all of our web-based configurations, the username and password is something that everyone needs to understand is going to be admin in the beginning, but that can be changed once you log in. So once you log in, one of the first things you should do is making sure that the username and passwords are changed so that no one else uses that password. Now, how do you do that? Simple. In this top right corner, if I go to there, I guess my browser's not working. In the top right corner, there.
It's right under the device menu, actually, Sharath.
Oh, I guess I just forgot totally. So general settings, and then we'll get into that. But you'll notice the menu structure is just the same as the AM200, right? Nothing changed. It's still consistent. So the menu structure of the web-based configurations are not any different than the previous ones. But what you have to notice if we go into the AV framework portion, it's the same as previous to the AM200. So if I go into AVF and then system, this is the same exact as the AM200. And then you'll notice that the menu structure is just, so consistency, right? Well, we're talking about consistency in terms of the user interface, but also how to change the actual web configuration as well. And then if we go to external, and the external tab is where we're also defining the same scheduling providers that we did on the AM200. So with the conversation about how these rooms are being built, it's the same exact way. There's not any difference between an AM200 and the Mercury. It's just the Mercury X and the Mercury product lines give you additional pieces of functionalities that the AM200 doesn't. So in this case, the dialer. So if you wanted to enable Bluetooth, you can enable Bluetooth in here. It's simple as turning the button on, turning the button off. There's some other options that you can utilize. But then if we go into the video display option, we still want to have the ability to control the video, the display, right? So if we go into the display, same as before. If we go into import, same as import, yep. And then we're going to go ahead and import just like it on the AM200 and 300. So there's no difference, right? If we're thinking about your technicians or your on-site support services, we're thinking about consistency. And let's say for consistency, you want your on-site tech to change the display to something else. They know how to do it on an AM200, but now the device is a Mercury. Since the consistency is the same between the 200 and AM200 and the Mercury, it's not teaching your staff how to make those changes every time they want to do something different. And then if we go into the touchscreen and display, you'll notice that the setup ability is there, but you also notice that there's also display customization aspect, right? So if I go into enable custom logo graphic, you can actually use custom logos. And then if I do enable custom backgrounds, you can actually point them to a URL for the custom backgrounds. So there's different aspects of the room space that you can utilize within the AV framework portion of the Mercury and everything else. Sorry, web-based configuration.
So
then,
I think
yeah,
ultimately, we previously showed the AM200, 300 scenario and the Mercury. These two systems are pretty in sync in terms of functionality, other than the obviously the audio communications functions. But otherwise, majority of the functionality is exactly the same. So these systems give you the scheduling in the front of the room experience. It gives you the wired and wireless input, as well as display control and those basic power management settings.
Yeah, definitely, but nice and easy. So, back to our conversation of just making it simple. So, just like before, you would just activate the configuration. So this is one step everyone should, remember how to do, is activating the configuration. If you don't remember this, none of the changes you made will actually function or take place until you do that. So now we've discussed two ways or two solutions for rooms where you just wanted HDMI with CEC control and some wireless capabilities. Then we added on some UC. But now the next type of room solution we can have a conversation is a standard classroom or a standard space where you want to just video switching along with control over a projector. So that's where the DMPS Lite product line will come in. And then you can utilize that with speakers as well. So if we go to the page for the 510, it's similar to just like the other units where if I sign in to the 510, you'll notice that the functionality is just the same. Oh my God, Delix, look at that. The menu structure is the same. So, this is the consistency aspect of the conversation that we want to talk about. So now let's say you wanted to just do some quick testing internally within the room for the 510. You can actually make route changes right from the page. And then if you wanted to then change the EDID tables for any of the inputs, you can use one global EDID input, or you can specify the EDID input for each input on that unit. And you'll notice you have access to every input along with that. Now, one of the main aspects I always like to mention is support for these products is easy as well because of web-based configuration. Let's say, for instance, a user is routing. User wants to provide their laptop on the screen, but then they say nothing is coming up. You can actually connect to the input, actually the DM Lite, and see if sync is being detected. I know from just tech support, history, one of the main things that a lot of people overlook is, are you actually sending any content, or is the HDMI cable working? So that gives you that ability as well. But the main aspect is the control of the display, right? So if we go into the actual output settings of it, you have additional control settings that have the ability, so you can do the gain controls for your inputs and your microphones that are available, your speaker output, your amp. But the main aspect I want everyone to keep in mind is on the bottom, you have your automatic power settings. So for the automatic power settings, you'll notice on the bottom is CEC, and you also have RS-232. Now, if you have the manual for the display or the projector, you can actually use the command string right in here. And then you can do ASCII or hex values. And then what you could do is you can actually test it right there. So why not utilize this functionality? You're not, making it complicated. You want to test the control? Cool. Put in the command, test it, and you're good to go. And then you can make these changes depending on the fly. So on power off, you want output time to wait 5 seconds, and after that, turn off the output. If sync is detected, turn it on, and then what's going to happen is the command string is sent on that play. So a very simple solution. And then if we go back in here, you'll notice RS-232 settings. You wanted to make the change to the baud rate, the database, the parity. So everything is available within the web-based configuration. I haven't stepped out in terms of the actual website, the configuration of the product.
And Sharath, all of this right now, what you're showing here, this is just right on the product, right? This is this doesn't require a separate control system
Nope.
in play, right? So this is, if you want to do video switching and just display control.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing I also forgot to mention is you can actually upgrade the firmware from the web-based configuration as well, from the menu structure of it. So additional option for you. Like I said, support is much easier as well. And then, now that we have a room, now I want to make that, I'm evolving this room to the next rendition let's add an AM200 as a source. Let's add a Crestron flip top, a TSW panel, and then let's also utilize a MPC3 as a user interface and a processor. This comes into play because this will allow you to set up your conference room. If everyone's not familiar with Crestron and our new Flex product line, that is our unified collaborations product line that we released within the past couple of years. So you can utilize the 510 with the Flex product lines for an easy room setup, right? So this is back to my conversation about ice cream, right? We started off with vanilla, but now let's throw some sprinkles, or let's throw some, some caramel on top. So this is where that comes into play. Now, with that in mind, if I go to the MPC3, it's similar to what we did earlier. We're going to put in the username and password, and then while that loads,
Sure, let's just talk for a second about how this system is built up. If you can just go back to that diagram for a second, if you don't mind. So this is, the slide says 210 here, but I think we were showing a 510 here earlier. Similar product family, just different I/O, right? So that's the video switching in the system. The reason now we're adding the MPC3 is for 2 reasons. One is obviously the MPC3 gives you a user interface where you now have 9 buttons you can assign functions to. But that MPC3 is also has a built-in 3 series control system. So you're running AV framework on there, and that's allowing you to extend beyond the built-in functionality of the 510, which was just display control, and now giving you the ability to add a touchscreen interface, the ability to add an Air Media as a wireless presentation source into that system. And we can go back to the configuration page now.
Oh, there we go. Right, so this is the page for the MPC3. So you'll notice now that we're in the AV framework side of things, the menu structure has changed, right? So now when you log in, this is what you'll see. And then if we go into your different menus, your menus are now available in this area. So when you first log into an MPC3, this is what you would see.
And now here you are connecting to the IP address of the control system, just reminding people that. And you do need to append 8008 at the end of the URL when you are configuring this sort of larger AV framework system.
Yeah, so that's a good point. 8008 is the way you connect to the AV framework for an MPC3, a DMPS, RMC3. And then that'll allow you to get into the AV framework product page just so that you can start configuring. So what I've done is actually I went into the AV framework just for time, saving some time. Configure is the tab you would go to set up your AV framework. So if I go into configure and device management, this is where I would go and add devices. So previously I had added a 510, and then once you add a 510, this is where you go to add a device. So what I did earlier is I added a touch panel, a 760. Let's say I want to add another touch panel. I would just go to this touch screen, name the display name, second touch panel, and then I would select the model. And then I would do IP ID. And then I would press.
Hey, Sharath, I have a request to slow down.
Oh, sure, of course.
Going too fast.
Sorry.
So we can slow
Sorry
down.
about that.
That's
Yeah.
okay. Let's just slow down. Thanks.
So with this now, what I did was I added a TSW 760, another touch panel. So reiterate the point, for anything with AV framework portion of it, you have to go into the configure drop-down menu, and then you have to go into device management. The device management is where you're adding in your devices for the room. So if I wanted to add an Air Media device into it or a Blu-ray player, I can do that as well. So if I go into these options, you have the ability to do these options. You'll see that there's a list, but then I'll also go over how to add your custom models as well. But this is the main area where you would define your system, right? It's not, this is where you would say what's in your system and what's out of your system. And then once you do that,
just adding to that point, Sharath, what I'd recommend here is, so we went from that that slide that showed kind of the wiring diagram of the system, right? So this is that step, taking that wiring diagram and building out your configuration, right? We've now, if you recall that diagram, we added the 510 switcher, we added the touch panel. We haven't added the Air Media yet, but we could do that. So you're building out all those peripherals, and now based off of your diagram, getting it to the point where all the basics are in place.
Yeah, definitely. And then the MPC3 is also user interface, right? So the buttons can be configured the way you want them to be used. So if I see my MPC3, you'll notice there's an action button. For a lot of products that you add into the AV framework environment, you can access the action button. And then what you're actually doing is clicking the button. So this represents the button on the user interface for the MPC3. And then let's say, for instance, I want the top left button to choose HDMI input 1. I want the middle button to choose HDMI input 2. I want this button to be the DM Lite 3. And then now you have options for mute on, mute off. And then this button, we can do rewind, play. But this really gives you options to figure out what you want to do with the user interface on the MPC3. And then once you do that, it's easy as pressing save. Now, one thing that I saw questions come in is the ability to save a configuration and load it to multiple rooms. And you're exactly right. A lot of these spaces are the same, right? So once I just created this room, you now have 20 of the same conference room, right? One thing you can do is actually download the configuration right from the menu. And then once you download that file, the file that you actually get is a .zip file. And then the .zip file is actually what you would use to upload to another MPC3 unit. So let's say, for instance, you had 15 other MPC3 units. You can then now use this file, this .zip file, and then load it to your next room. So it's easy as going to upload configuration and then choosing that .zip file that we just downloaded. So I can just do that and then upload it to the next room. So that comes into our conversation about scalability, where if you do one room, you can now use this .zip file and load it to all the other rooms within one area. And then all the changes I made, I have to activate just like the other ones. So if I press the activate button, that's where that comes into play. So, Delix, did you want to add?
Yeah, sure. So can you click that status tab for me?
Status, yeah.
Yeah. So just go to the dashboard. So so just stepping you through some of the key things here. So this dashboard in AV Framework, so we took that step of adding all the devices, adding the switcher, because the switcher is a key component to the system. So as you can see, I know all my information, status. Speaking to the point of what Sharath was saying, this is a great troubleshooting tool. It's a great tool to kind of build out your system and understand where you're at. Once you've done that, you can, now that you've added your devices, you know what the current state of your devices is, now you can start building in some of the more complex logic. So now we can go to configure. Let's just go to system first.
Whoops. So the system tab actually gives you additional controls for relay and touchscreen graphics. Is that where you're getting into?
Yeah, we can go on that.
Yep. So let's say you had a screen in the room, a projector screen, and you wanted to use the relay port on your 510. You can actually associate the relay connection to screen 1, and then you can control the relay behavior. So that gives into that additional controls that you can have. Now, let's say earlier on that drop-down list, a driver wasn't available. If I go to the drivers tab, this is where I would be able to import drivers within this unit. So if I go to import and I go to, let's say, one of the files I downloaded, that's where you would go. So let me, before I get into that, I wanted to make sure everyone noticed the drivers website. So drivers.crestron.io, this is what you would see. So what I did earlier was I downloaded an IP driver. Now, if you look at the website, you can actually drill down to what type of control you want on this website, and then what manufacturer you want. And then once you select a file, let's say for testing instances, we're gonna go Samsung. I wanted to download this file, so then I would click it, and then I would download the driver. And then I would come back into my MPC3. I would hit the import button once you're in the systems setup menu. I would go to my desktop and where I downloaded the files. It comes as a .zip file, but you do need to extract that. And then once you extract it, the file that you have to load into it is what we call a package file. The extension is .pkg. This package file is what you're actually loading into your unit. So once you press open, you'll notice that what it's doing is taking that file that we just did and uploading that driver into the unit itself. And then once you're done, now you have that driver available for you to use. So then this can be enabled, this can be used any way you want. So any drivers that are available on our drivers website will then come up in our drivers. So the one I downloaded earlier, I totally forgot what it was called. What was the LG one? So if I go to here, here's the LG IP driver that I just downloaded. So, you know, this gives you that ability to import the drivers very simple.
And sure, I do acknowledge that this is a slight workflow difference from the Air Media and Mercury front, right, which have the direct portal integration. There is that extra added step of having to navigate to the portal and finding a device. It's something we're going to be looking to streamlining and making consistent across whether you're using Crestron AV Framework or whether you're using the direct functionality that's built into the device.
Yeah. So, you know, once you're done with that, let's say you as an admin, you're done everything. Last thing you would do is just activate it. And then once you activate it, all you have to do is just wait until it's loaded and you're good to go. But let's say you also have a team and you have a team of users. One thing you can do is go to the users tab and create a new user so that you can give them access to, you know, upload or change the configuration. And then if you want to change the admin password, you can do that as well in the users tab. So, you know, there isn't much in terms of complexity when utilizing AV Framework. Once you start, you know, for me, once I started using it, everything started making sense in the back end for me. So that, you know, that's what I recommend. So now let's, for instance, Delix, I put in this 510, but I'm not using the last two DM Lite inputs. So what I could do is if I go into configure, AV routing, I am now in the section where I can change what parts of the AV routing that I can change. So if I wanted to change this to, let's say, I don't want to use these inputs and I want to change this input's name to laptop. I want to change this input's name to local PC. What this does is this updates the user interface that you're associating to this group. So if there's a TSW 760, I can then change the icons that show up on the panel. Now, one of the cool things about this is that once you change the icon and you press activate, it actually updates it on the screen. So you don't have to reload any files. So once I press activate, all the changes I just made right now is now being updated on the back end for your touch panel, your MPC3, and your 510 at the same time. So this gives you that added ability to make those feature sets. So if we, if we go back to the slides itself, Felix and I just set up a room from that used to be a 510. We set it up with an MPC3 in terms of the internal changes within less than 20 to 30 minutes. So that's the other aspect that I want everyone to kind of keep in mind, is that configuring these rooms are much easier as opposed to rooms with custom programming or anything in that sense, because all the changes you're making is live, and once you activate it, you're good to go in that room. So it makes it much easier in that sense. So now that we're done with this, one of the last pieces that we have is the DMPS unit, right? The DMPS unit, it provides you the ability for dual display. Okay, so this is where that comes into play, is the multiple display room, and it gives you dual display aspect of it. So if we skip back into the setup, it's the same as the MPC3. So we do admin, admin, and then once we sign in, what you'll see is the same menu structure that you saw on the MPC3. So let's just leave that for a bit. So Felix, there's no change, right? It's the same exact thing.
Similar workflow. Yeah. You're taken to your dashboard of all your devices. Sharath in this case has some of his own devices already added into the system. The DMPS is a unique animal a little bit because it's a control processor with video switching built in, right? It's so you don't have that step of adding a switcher now because the switcher is built in. In the case of the 510, which we covered previously, you had to add the switcher first because that is a control processor in a touch panel. So there's some nuances here. With the DMPS system, it's actually one of the larger systems you can build out with AV Framework, in that you can do 1, 2, or 3 or 4 unique displays in a system, uniquely routable displays, if you will. So we'd follow the same workflow here, Sharath, right? We'd start at the system level, do our system level configuration changes, like changing the room name. We can start there.
So if I go to the system level, it's the same menu structure that we saw previously. You'll notice that the room name is what I had earlier. I can name it, customize it. I can also enable the actual speaker because DMPSs have an amp built in. And you can enable the microphones, and you'll notice the menu structure is just like before.
Exactly the same thing. And here, and maybe this is a point we didn't touch on earlier, is so we have Crestron Fusion. If you need to monitor this room within Crestron Fusion, the relay, if we want to set up a projector screen, touch screen and customer graphics, custom graphics, apologize. You can set up some screensavers and logos on the touch panel. Drivers, that's where you would import and export your, any drivers that we haven't built in for you. And power settings. Power settings is actually cool. This looks very similar to what we did on the Air Media and Mercury, except you have one additional option. So you can do occupancy based off of an occupancy sensor in the system. There you can do the always on standby mode, which gives you the ability to put in the business hours. And then you have a video sync based power mode, where you can set it up so that upon a person connecting a laptop, for example, you have the ability to turn on the system and turn off the system and define a timeout. So now you start getting into these sorts of more unique experiences that you're looking to deliver for a particular space. And I think it's key. So now that you've kind of configured the high level settings, we'd go to device management.
Yeah. Now we go into device management. It's similar to just like we did before. Is if you wanted to add a device, you would go to add device. You choose what you want, but you'll notice the difference is you can now add in digital media transmitters and digital media receivers. So if I wanted to add in a 4K, 302 or a 202, I can then add that in. So I can just do transmitter, and then I would press save, and then I press OK. And then now I added a transmitter into my system. And then the next step you would actually do is you go to AV routing. And then the AV routing is pretty much what Delix mentioned is you're telling the system the devices that you have plugged in. So you would then, if I added a laptop, you can add the laptop command to this. And then once I activate it on here, you would see the device transmitter populate here. So this is one portion that I need everyone to just make sure they understand, is that anything you add in regards to digital media devices and third-party drivers, you do have to associate it within this world, because in this AV configuration tab, you're configuring the system as wired, the wired system in the logical system. And then, like I mentioned earlier, in the sense of time, I'm going to just go through this. You activate the configuration, you can download the configuration, and then you can upload the configuration as well. And then once I activate it, and now you're good to go. So there's no difference between the DMPS and MPC3 in regards to AV framework. It's just the ability to add additional devices.
Okay, so now we're going to be going into a different segment with AV Framework on the Crestron Virtual Control Platform. As we had mentioned earlier, Crestron Virtual Control Platform is a more IT-centric approach to room control, in that it is kind of deployed centrally in a server environment. This can load custom C# programs, or it can load a AV framework in the system. So here we're going to build out a very simple system. We're going to be building out a system in which you have simply have a display or a projector that you want in a huddle space, for example. Maybe you have a simple touch panel interface, and that's all you need. Maybe you could even control the display directly if you want to just use the built-in source switching of the display. So I'll take you through this here in a second.
Before you jump into that, I just want to help clarify for people, Delix, that how the VC4 is configured via AV framework and or programmed in C#. These are the same application being controlled two different manners. So AV framework allows you to configure the system to meet the needs of the customer, but C# allows you to completely program a custom solution. So I want to make sure our customers understand the difference that AV framework provides versus what C# programming provides. This is not something that's available in simple Windows. This is something that's available purely with C# programming and or AV framework. So you have those two items to choose from when configuring a VC4 environment. And of course, for this session, we're going to tell them all about how to do it with AV framework. So Delix, I give it back to you, my good sir.
Sure. So hopefully you guys are seeing my screen okay. So this is the Crestron Virtual Control. So I'm just logged into the web interface of this product. So just a couple of things I want to highlight. So this is the IP address of the VC4 platform. The very first step I would need to do to bring AV Framework on board with this is go to my settings tab and go to the program library. VC4 has this kind of concept of having a master program library, especially if you have different configurations and different programs that exist. So I would need to add program and upload a program file. So this is where I would upload the Crestron AV Framework program file. You may ask where to get that. For any AV framework system, the way you do so is you go to the Crestron website and search the product that runs AV Framework, in this case VC4, go to the Resources tab, and you will see the software AV framework for VC4. I'll download that package. Now navigate back to my VC4, choose that file. I have this package already available on my computer, so I'm just going to click the CPZ file here. This is the AV framework program, and then what will happen is that this will guide me through the steps to load that program into the library. You'll see that you'll have to choose several files. I'm working on a server that's halfway across the country, so it's a little bit slower. So you will have to navigate to several key files. As you can see here, it's going to ask me for my WebEx panel, my configuration pages, and my TSW project. I would have to load each one of those, and that's all available in that package that I mentioned earlier. Once you do so, you click add, and now that AV framework is available in your program library. So this is the one I just did earlier, AV framework version 6.4, and it's available in my program library. The reason program library is important is it also allows me to make fleeting changes. Say if I need to update all my rooms in VC4 to the latest AV framework version, I can just update that program library instance with the newer version and roll out those changes. Now, the next step for me is to add a room within AV Framework. I've already done so. I've clicked Add Room. I've selected AV Framework. I'm going to type in 6.4 here, that from the program library, type in a room name, a room ID, enter the address. The address is important here because with VC4, your server may be in a different geographical location, so to capture time information accurately. So I can click enter all the necessary information and add. My room is already in here, so I'm not going to click add, but DLX 6.4 room is the room we're working on. So now I can see the program is running. I can access the configuration URL. I can access a xpanel URL as well. With this, now when I click that, you'll see it pops up a page very similar to what we've been discussing this whole time. A page of where I can add devices, manage system level settings, manage AV routing, manage configurations, and I would go through that same workflow again. So the advantage of VC4 here is that you have this sort of scalable concept where you can now do 1, 2, 5, hundreds of rooms, roll out changes, and all from like a central architecture here. So with that, Sharath, I'll hand the presentation back over to you.
Sharath, you're muted, my man. You need to unmute. The joys of education over the internet. It appears Sharath may be having some technical issues. Hang on. Because we still see him muted. Let's see if I can unmute you, my man. I'm going to unmute you. How about that? Nope, you're having technical issues. It will not allow us to unmute.
So Rich, I can take over.
Why don't you
here.
take over, Delix? That'd be great.
I got it.
Oh, here he is. Okay.
There he goes. Sorry. So as I was mentioning before,
Let's go. Sharath, you want to go to presentation mode, my good sir?
It's me now.
From the current slide. Oh, that's you, Delix?
Yeah. Give me a second. And
sorry about that.
Here we are.
The conversation, what I was saying to the thin air was that everything we showed is what's available in AV Framework, but moving forward, we are building upon additional feature sets within AV Framework. So this isn't the end, right? This isn't what's available forever. We're building upon AV Framework, and that's where DLX is going to get into on what's available in the next rendition.
Sure. So a lot of what we covered so far, I mean, it will require a deeper dive for you to get into these systems, and I really encourage you to view the resources that we have and sort of and pilot and test these systems and to get a better understanding of the differences. But what I want to tell you is that AV Framework, one of the key points I mentioned earlier is that the feature set is continuing to grow, and because we have such a large audience here and folks that are key to understand and know about what's coming with Crestron, I wanted to share with you some updates that will be coming. Move this over. So the three main areas that we're looking to improve upon in AV Framework is one, flexible touch panel user interfaces, two, the addition of NVX into the AV Framework configurations, and three, better management of scalable rooms and multiple rooms is the key there. And I'll dive into each of these points individually. So the first thing is the user interface. So as we've explained so far, AV Framework has a user interface that automatically adjusts to the configuration of the room system. One of our most recent initiatives is now moving from Crestron's smart graphics-based user interfaces to CH5 or Crestron HTML5 based user interfaces. And what this will give you is a sort of hybrid scenario. It's going to give you a configurable room that you can manage using web-based configuration, but giving you the ability to add a custom user experience, add a flavor of customization, if you will, if needed. And the reason this is important is oftentimes it's the user experience where this sort of customization is required. It's not really the configuration of the room. It's perhaps a customer wants to match some logos or styling or color or different button types. And we're aiming to provide eventually 3 basic levels of customization. One is basic icons, backgrounds, screensavers, that kind of stuff. A lot of what we did in the web browser there. The next level up would be the ability to customize colors, fonts, font sizes, icons, basic CSS type customization. You do need to know web programming languages, basic understanding of that in editing style stage, but not be a full-on HTML programmer. And the last is if you want to build out a fully custom user interface. And in this case, you would need to know HTML, JavaScript, and CSS to build out that interface. So again, the point here is that AV Framework allows you to configure the room, but now you get to add that sort of custom twist to the front end through what the user sees in the user experience. We're hoping to bring this out by the end of this year. NVX as a switcher in AV Framework.
So hang on, I'm sorry, Felix, sorry to cut you off before you jump in. I know we're running late, but so just so everyone understands and make sure that it's very clear to everybody, because the questions came up a lot about customization.
Yep.
This is going to allow, and I just want to reiterate what you just said, by migrating to a Crestron HTML5 implementation, now you really get the skins you're looking for, the color scheme they're looking for, the logos they're looking for, exactly what you're seeing here. I just want to reiterate that because that came out throughout the question and answers many, many, many times.
Exactly. Yeah, and the great thing about HTML5 based interfaces, there's tons of resources out there, right? This is no longer specific to Crestron. There's all sorts of widgets and gadgets and stuff built that you can leverage to build a very modern user interfaces. NVX as a switcher in AV Framework. So this has been a key question that I get asked often. We today in the AV Framework systems support the DMPS, the DMPS Lite models, the DM Lite switcher models. A lot of them are fixed switcher, more traditional based switchers that we've incorporated. With this, we are delving into the realm of NVX. It's a pretty big initiative in that NVX kind of redefines video switching altogether, in that you can now build N by N switchers, meaning it's no longer 2x1 or 2x2 that you're locked into. You can build out a system of up to 16 total endpoints when we come out with this, and 4 unique displays in the system. And a lot of the endpoint configurations can happen automatically, in that you don't need to be an IT expert to deploy this, especially in the realm of IT-based video routing, and giving you all the other benefits and bonuses that AV Framework allows in terms of setting up routing structures for both audio, video, as well as USB. So this is an exciting initiative for us as well. It is coming. Like I said, this is a preview into the future, giving you some taste of what the future holds for AV Framework. And the last one, I know this was mentioned several times, if you want to manage multiple rooms today with AV Framework, in many of the instances, it's an import and export of a configuration. Yes, it's very simple. On the VC4 allows you to handle that better because VC4 has that web page to manage multiple rooms, but we want to do better with this and give you the ability to manage a bunch of AV framework room instances, different types of room instances. So this is our initiative to redefine the deployment aspect of AV framework. So this will give you the ability to launch the configuration, set up rooms, room templates, and basically have an easy ability to roll changes throughout your organization and that sort of stuff. And the reason we give you a preview of what's coming is all of this is these are items that are in development, and we tremendously value feedback. As a product manager at Crestron, we rely on what the customer needs are, what the integrator and installer needs are for those building these systems, so that from both a user experience standpoint as well as a deployment standpoint, we can do better in terms of building out the solutions. So these are just 3 high-level items. We have much more in the pipeline for AV framework, as well as all our configurable room solutions. And Rich, I hand it back over to you.
All right, great. Well, thank you all for staying. We went a little bit over our main course time. I appreciate everyone staying. We are going to stick around and try and answer as many questions as we possibly can, as we have over 400 questions in the sessions that we need to talk to and respond to. So we're going to do our best to get to them as much as possible. We're going to go ahead and wrap up the recording. We're going to stop recording here. So those of you who need to drop off, we understand. Those of you who'd like to hang out with us, chat via question and answer, we'll be glad to do so. We are going to go through the laundry list of questions and answers. We appreciate you joining us. Our next class is tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern, which is the MEV-201 Environmental Design Concepts, Tuesday, May 12th. We look forward to seeing you then. All of the questions and answers that we do respond to, which we will be all of them, will be sent out in an email to you within a few days. We will be posting this session to online help, and we will be including the PowerPoint as well. Thank you for joining. For those of you who wish to stay, we look forward to staying with you. We are going to answer as much as we possibly can.